back to my channel. I hope that you're doing well. Welcome to another video. If you guys have been watching my channel for the last 3 months, you will know what time it is. It is time for another cozy wrap up. And of course, we have a Christmas mug, some Christmas pajamas. I changed my scrunchie. I was wearing a pink one, but I figured maybe a couple of some blue colors would be better than pink. My hair's up in this very cozy messy bun, and this is how we're doing the wrap up today. This chai tea is very, very hot, so I don't know how much of this I'll be actually drinking in this video, but I am excited to drink it because it smells delicious. It's a vanilla chai tea, and I absolutely adore it. So that I'm just gonna put down because I'm already burning myself. Ow. And let's talk wrap up. November was my best reading month that I have had in the whole year. Like, I don't know what happened. I don't know where I got the time. I don't know what happened in my brain. I think I just like freaking went into overdrive mode, and I read 26 books. Technically 27, but one of them I'm not counting because it was a beta read, but I did read 27 books in the month of November. 26 I'm going to be talking about today. So, holy moly. So, obviously quite a bit of books. That's a tongue twister. But let's talk stats because why not? Also, can we just talk about the new intro? I'm loving it. I kind of want to keep it all year round, but it's not appropriate. But anyways, the new intro, I love it. It's so cute. Adore. Anyways, moving on. Stats. I have everything written down on my iPad, so if you see me looking down, that's what I'm looking at. So, like I said, I read a total of 26 books this month. That was a total of 7,820 pages. That averages out to about 261 pages a day and around a 300-page book. That's the average for the book numbers, about around 300 pages. As for star ratings, I gave 6 5 stars, 13 4 stars, 6 3 stars, and 1 0 star, and that is because I DNF'd a book. But no 2s and no 1s. I read 2 physical books, 1 ebook, and 23 audiobooks reading alongside the physical book. So I decided to track that because I read most of my books through audio, and then I read along with it because that is how I prefer to read. So 23 of those I read with audiobook and physical book, which is insane. All of those 26 books that I read were all owned, all from my own physical TBR, so that's wonderful. As for the genre breakdowns, I read 1 sci-fi fantasy retelling, 1 just general sci-fi, 5 fantasies, 2 classics, 11 contemporaries, 4 romances, and 2 dystopians. As for the age breakdown, I read 7 adult books, 10 YA books, and 9 middle grade books. For representation, I had 1 book with disability rep, 4 books with queer rep, 2 books with mental health rep, which means that 19 of the books that I read had no type of representation in them at all. 5 of the books that I read had characters of color, and I read books by 2 separate authors that were people of color. Definitely need to step that up in the new year. 11 of the books that I read were written by men, and 15 of them were written by women. And then the last stat is my year breakdown. So I read 1 book published in 1925, 1 book published in 1937, 2 books published in 1999, 3 books published in 2000, 3 books published in 2001, 1 book published in 2011, 1 book published in 2012, 2 books published in 2013, 2 books published in 2015, 1 book published in 2017, 5 books published in 2018, 1 book published in 2019, and 3 books published in 2020. That is all of my stats. I've definitely elongated the amount of stats that I include in my videos, so please let me know if you guys like that. And if you don't, let me know that too, so that I know what to include and what not to include, so I can better appease you guys, because all those stats just take me time. But I enjoy them, so I hope that you enjoy them. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is actually the book that I DNF'd, and this was Cheeky Royals. I don't remember the author, but I will put the picture of the book up on the screen for you. I just didn't enjoy this. I think I got about 6 chapters in, and I just wasn't enjoying the book in and of itself. It was very misogynistic. I didn't care for the queer representation in here. It was outed very strangely, and I just didn't like the way that the book was put together. I didn't care for the writing style, and I didn't really like where the story was going. This was supposed to follow a girl who was like working for the king's something, King's Court, I think is what it was called. And she was supposed to go on this journey to find the prince who has been missing, and not really missing, but shulking his duties. Is shulking a word? I don't know. Negating his duties as prince, and the king is trying to get him back to come back to the kingdom. So she is supposed to go and pretend to be somebody that he doesn't know, and it's a whole thing. And I just didn't like it. It was kind of a waste of time, so I didn't push myself to read it, and I DNF'd it. I didn't rate it. Usually I rate my DNFs, but I didn't feel like I was far enough into the book to rate it, so I just left that one alone. Also, if I didn't already mention, this is going to be a very long video, so just buckle your seatbelts. We're in for a wild ride. This is my stack, by the way. The first book that I read in the month of November was Scarlet by Marissa Meyer, and I really enjoyed this. I gave this book a 4-star. I think that the series as a whole is just a really fun series to read, and I just enjoy her writing style. The characters I didn't love as much as I enjoyed Cinder's character, but I do like that Cinder's perspective was in this book just about equally balanced between the two, and I like how the story is connected. If you don't know what Cinder is about, this follows a sci-fi retelling of different Disney princesses, or just different Disney fairy tales, I should say. So the first one is Cinder, which follows Cinderella retelling, and then this one is Scarlet, which is a Little Red Riding Hood retelling, and I just really enjoyed it. I liked how the story kind of picked up where it left off, but also divulged so much more that you didn't get to learn in the first book, and it really built on the characters and their character arcs. Like I said, I didn't really care for this storyline as much as the first book, but I still think that it had some really strong attributes to it that made me enjoy the story as much as it was. I've heard people say that this is actually their least favorite book in the series, so I'm really curious to see what the the third and fourth books do in the series. So really excited for this. Don't really know how much more to talk about this. I felt like November flew by, but also now that I'm thinking about it, I read all of these books, and a lot of them felt like I read them like 3 months ago. So I'm gonna try my best to wrap these up in a way that makes sense. All right, and then I read back-to-back Marissa Meyer books, and I read Renegades, and I adored this. I gave this a 5-star. This was an absolute joy of a read. I had so much fun reading this. This follows a group of people called the Renegades, and they are like this superhero group and force that everyone in their world loves and adores and relies on. And it also follows Nova, who's the main character of this book, and she is part of the this is strange because I'm actually reading the second book and I can't think of what they're called. I think it's called the Anarchists. I could be wrong about that. Blanking on the name, but they are basically the anti-heroes of the story. They are the villains, and she is part of that group, but somehow and some way things get tangled up, and she ends up as part of the Renegades, becoming a double spy, and it's just so good. There's so much intrigue, there's so much deception, and I just love the characters. I love the powers that were explained in here. I think there's so much more that can be divulged in this story that is just gonna be talked about so much more in the second and third book. I'm halfway through the second book already and absolutely loving it, so I'm really excited to see where this goes. Marissa Meyer just has a way of writing stories that are just so engaging, so easy to fly through. Her writing style is so much fun, so I cannot wait to continue on with the series and hopefully love it. Also, if you guys notice that my shirt is really wrinkly, just don't judge me. I didn't feel like running this to the dryer or ironing it. I just put it on for the video. They're pajamas. Okay, up next we have Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. Jeez. This is a messy video, I'm sorry. I don't really know how I feel about this book. I thought I was gonna give it around a 2-star for most of the book, and then the ending made me cry. So, I mean, if it can pull that much emotion out of me, then I think that it deserves at least a 3-star, but I just don't think that classics are for me. I think I've said this on more accounts, more than one occasion, but it's not that I didn't like it. I just think that it goes over my head. Like, I don't understand why it's a classic. I don't understand why it's so highly revered. I don't understand why it's taught in schools. Like, I just don't get it. Like, I literally had to read some Spark Notes on this to try to figure out why it's so acclaimed. And I mean, I guess once I read into it more and I look into the symbolism and all that fun stuff, then I can kind of see why they teach it in school, just to get kids to like read more deeper into the stories that they're reading. But other than that, I just don't get it. I don't want to talk about this anymore. I gave it a 3-star. It was okay. It wasn't my favorite. Moving on. Okay, how about a book that I do want to talk about? And that is The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. I read this for Luna's book club. This was our the group book for the month, and I adored this. I gave this a 5-star. This was fantabulous. I loved it so much. I think that Elizabeth Acevedo has a way of writing stories that just are so raw, so real, and just so open, and I love that. And the fact that this book is written in verse and still has that powerful effect, it's just baffling. This follows a girl named Xiomara who is really struggling with her identity as an individual, as well as trying to cope with her parents, well, her family's strict rules and religion. And she's really questioning what she believes and, you know, the things that you're allowed to do with your life, your body, your future. And it's just such a hard-hitting story that also involves spoken poetry or spoken word and slam poetry. I put those together on accident, but it was just so powerful. This does have trigger warnings for mild sexual assault. It just really talks about how what men think that they are able to do with women's bodies without their permission, or how they talk about women's bodies and how they're portrayed, and it just talks about that really well. Overall, Elizabeth Acevedo talks about really hard-hitting topics in a way that's understandable as well as relatable, and I love them so much. Absolutely love this. I will definitely recommend this to pretty much everyone, and I'm really excited that I have read this one because I really was lagging on it, and now I know why everyone talks about it so much. I almost knocked over the whole stack, and I would have been mad. Let's just say that. So good. Okay, the next book that I read is Illuminae by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. I always pause when I say their names because I can't ever figure out what it is without thinking about it. But this is a sci-fi book told in mixed media format, and it follows two teenagers that were in a long-term relationship, and they just broke up right as the whole world was being invaded, and they end up on two separate spaceships, and they're communicating with each other through mixed media, but you're also like reading it as if the government is conducting like interviews and trying to figure out what happened from the future into the past. I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but it was a really awesome sci-fi. It was really easy to read. I listened to it via audiobook, and that was definitely the way to go. It's a full cast audiobook, and it was fantastic. Like, probably one of the best audiobooks that I've ever listened to, and it definitely heightened my experience for reading this book. There were some times though when the sci-fi elements went over my head and were a bit too sci-fi for me. I don't read a lot of sci-fi, so that was something to definitely wrap my head around, but overall I really liked the story. Some of the twists and turns in this were insane, and I was like gripped to the very end. Again, it really made it really easy based on how it was written, because some of the pages are just like really interesting. I want to show you like my favorite like these were like my favorite pages to like read the words like in this really interesting format, and it was just a lot of fun. If you haven't picked this up, I would definitely say give it a try, but 100% go audiobook format because that was amazing. So good. So freaking good. And I didn't know if I said this, but I gave this a 4-star. I think the fact that it was sci-fi and it went over my head a little bit hindered my experience of this, but overall really enjoyed it. All right, next we're going to talk about books as a whole. If you guys watched my 24-hour readathon, I read the first 8 books in the Series of Unfortunate Events series, and I overall enjoyed the series. I really did. I thought that they were quite fun and easy to read, easy to fly through. Some of the things were a little bit annoying during my reading experience, but overall, enjoyed it. The first book and the 6th book are the only books that I gave 3-star, and all the rest of them I gave a 4-star. So overall, enjoyed the series. I'm not going to hold these up while I talk about them, but I did read them. Now, I think the reason why I gave the first one 4-star, it was just a little bit too much to like wrap my head around. It was very nonsensical, and it was very interesting. I didn't grow up on the series, so I think that if I would have read this at a different time, I probably would have loved them. And I think for kids of their time, this is a perfect book to read. Like reading it in the age of that the kids are in, I think that it would be perfect, but it was just a little over my head for the first book. But as I started to get into it, I enjoyed it a lot more. The 6th book, during a 24-hour readathon, I was tired, exhausted, and delirious, and I just wasn't paying attention to the story as much as I should have, and so that ended up hindering my experience of reading that particular book. But overall, I still enjoyed the story. The only thing that I didn't care for is the fact that it is super, super formulaic. Each book is basically the first book rewritten, just with different scenarios and different ways that Count Olaf finds ways to try to manipulate these children. And it was just very formulaic, and it wasn't like the best experience because you already knew what was going to happen. It was just like waiting till you get to the end. So other than that, really enjoyed the series. I wouldn't reread it. I definitely wouldn't reread it, but I'm glad that I read them. I will finish out the series, and then I will be unhauling all of them because I just don't feel like they should take up space when I'm not ever going to reread them again. All right, let's talk about another 5-star book, and that is Hollowpox by Jessica Townsend. Y'all knew I was gonna give this 5 stars because it was immaculate. It was amazing. I love this series so much, and I'm so glad that I'm all caught up because it was amazing. It was so good. Nevermore follows a girl named Morgan Crow, who is destined to die on the eve of her 11th birthday. However, on that day, she gets bid on during bidding day by a man named Jupiter North, and he whisks her away to this wonderful place called Nevermore, where she's put in a competition to become a part of the Wonder Society. That's the very first book. The books divulge from there, and there's just so much to learn about this land and the people and the characters, and they are just fantabulous. My favorite character in this whole series is Fenestra. She is a Magnificat, and she's a talking cat, and she has so much sass, and she's just fabulous. And then Morgan as a character just develops so much. She makes stupid decisions. Sometimes she is a young girl, and she's still learning about this whole new world that she lives in. And she doesn't always make the best decisions, but she's always there for her friends, always trying to figure out ways to help people around her, and she's always trying to do it for the better. And it's just so much fun to watch her story become what it is, and I just cannot wait. I cannot wait to read more. I've heard that this is supposed to become a 9-book series, so you best believe I will be jumping on that train as soon as the 4th book is ready for pre-order. And here's another book that I really enjoyed, and this is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. I gave this a 5-star as well. I really enjoyed this story as a whole. I think that the idea of morally gray characters and really just figuring out who is right and who is wrong in the situation, it was just really fun to watch come together. And I love that at the end, you find that like both of the characters really are doing things and like accomplishing their goals for the wrong reasons, but you can't help but root for some of the characters in here because like there's just so much morally grayness happening that there is one side that you lean towards, and I absolutely adore that. This follows Eli and Victor, who are best friends in college, and they are working on a thesis together that has to do with EOs, which are extraordinaries. And extraordinaries basically have these powers, but in order to gain those powers, you have to have a near-death experience. You basically have to die, be brought back to life, and then you have these powers. You're flashing between the like college timeline and 10 years into the future, which is the now timeline. And in the now timeline, Victor is just getting out of prison, and he is on the hunt to find Eli because they are now the biggest enemies, and you don't know why. And you just follow their story, trying to figure out what happened, what caused this, and what's going to happen because of that, and it is just so much fun. I will definitely be reading the 2nd book very soon, hopefully this month, and I'm just so excited to see where the story goes because it was just so incredibly enthralling to watch the story come together and come full circle, but there's so much left to be desired, so I'm really excited for this. All right, and then I read a really hard-hitting book, and this is That's Not What Happened by Cody Keplinger. This book follows the survivors of a school shooting, and it was really hard to read. It basically follows a girl who is trying to figure out if she should tell the people of her town and everyone that was involved that the martyr of this school shooting, this girl named Sarah, was basically labeled the martyr because they thought that she had this really emotional experience with the shooter that had to do with proclaiming her faith. But the main character knows that that's not what happened, and she's trying to figure out if she should tell the truth and should she face the consequences that come from that. And this was so incredible. So incredible. It definitely has hard-hitting topics. It talks about school shooting in a lot of detail, so if that's not something that you're comfortable with, I would definitely not read this. But it also sheds a light on victims of a school shooting and how they move on from that, and how the media portrays what actually happens, and how things get spun, and how the victims feel about that, and how they go about coping with their own truths and moving on from the things that happened to them. It also talks about like the emotional and post-traumatic stress disorder that they have from that. And it just was really fantastic. Again, very hard-hitting. Definitely made me cry multiple times. I got chills, and I felt for every single one of these characters. There is some rep in here for asexuality, which is really awesome. There is some rep for, there's a blind character in here. There's also a character that was shot in the back and paralyzed from the waist down. It it had a lot of representation, and it also had some really awesome topics talked about in here, and I just felt like it was done beautifully. I definitely feel like this book is way underhyped. I have not heard one person talk about this, and I really think that more people should read it because it was phenomenal. And again, I gave this 5 stars. All right, let's take it a little bit more fun and lighthearted and casual with Lumberjanes graphic novel. This is volume 1. I did read this and really enjoyed it. I read it in one sitting, had a lot of fun with it. This follows a group of girls who are Lumberjane scouts, basically like a Girl Scout, but a Lumberjane scout. And they get kind of pulled into these really interesting situations with weird monsters, magical beings, magical objects, and they're trying to convince their camp counselor that this is real, and their camp counselor wants nothing to do with their lies and deceit that they are spinning. And it was just a fun time. It was a roller coaster of craziness, and I'm definitely going to continue on with the series because I want to know what happens. This definitely leaves off on a huge cliffhanger, so I must know what's going to happen. I did give this a 4-star, really enjoyed it, and would definitely recommend it if you just want something fun and easy to read. All right, and then we have a romance, and this is Head Over Heels. This is a romance that follows a gymnast who was basically on track to head to the Olympics, but during the the trials before the Olympics, she ends up having a really bad injury and blew out her knee and basically flushed out of gymnastics forever. And then it follows her years later after she's coming back to her hometown and becomes a coach for a really talented gymnast. And she also starts to create a relationship with the head coach who brought her on. And I really enjoyed this book. I think that I had a bit of a hard time connecting with the characters in the very beginning, but overall I enjoyed it. I ended up giving this a 4-star. I think that the book had a lot of potential but didn't quite measure up in some of the ways that I wanted to. But it also had some really awesome talk about sexual assault in here. So this does have trigger warnings for sexual assault. It talked about sexual assault from a medical advisor to the gymnasts, and that was definitely something that was very prevalent. I think it was 2 Olympics ago when many of the gymnasts stood up and talked about what was happening to them by one of the medical doctors, the sports doctors, and this was prevalent in the story, and I thought that it was handled really well. There was also something that I really enjoy when I read a romance, because everyone knows when you read a romance, you have that earth-shattering fight in the middle of the book or the end of the book, and then you have the makeup, and then they fall in love. It's how most formulas of romances go, and I think that this one was done nicely because the situation that happened, I feel like both parties were able to own up to the mistakes that they made as well as learn from them, and I sometimes feel like those things can be brushed over really easily and not really talked about, but I think that that was something that was done really well in this romance novel. The male character that made the mistakes that he made, he owned up for it, took responsibility, and did the actions necessary to make sure that he made up for it in a proper way, and I thought that that was done really well. So overall, really enjoyed it, gave it a 4-star. I don't know if I'll reread it anytime soon, but I'll definitely keep it and maybe reread it next year, because overall, I did enjoy it. I think I just blacked out while talking about that book, because I don't even remember what I said. All right, let's talk about another Elizabeth Acevedo book, and that is With the Fire on High. I loved this. I gave this a 5-star. This is probably my favorite Elizabeth Acevedo book to date. I absolutely adored this. This is her only book so far that's not written in verse, and I loved it. I love the fact that Elizabeth Acevedo knows how to write some very controversial and hard-hitting topics, but also pack so much love and intense care into her books, and I loved it so much. This follows a girl who had a baby in high school, and it's her senior year, and she is taking care of her baby, also dealing with the baby's father, and trying to figure out a new relationship while also really immensely trying to figure out her future, because she is in love with cooking and food, but she doesn't know if that's really a future that she can divulge into. This is fantastic. This is filled with recipes and amazing just like warmth and cuddly everything, and I just loved it. I think that Elizabeth Acevedo's writing is something special, and every time I pick up one of her books, it's like falling back into a very warm hug, but also a lot of awesome topics, and I love that so much. It was just done really well. I don't really know how much more to explain how much I loved this, but if you haven't read an Elizabeth Acevedo book yet, please do. I mean, all of her books are good, but I think I recommend this one the most out of all of them. All right, let's talk about a really random read. I picked up Divergent like in the middle of the night. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning and I wanted something to read to help me go to sleep, but I didn't want to go pick up a physical book, so I picked up the audiobook and the ebook of Divergent and I read it. This is a reread for me. I read it many, many years ago in high school and I overall enjoyed my reread. I gave it a 4-star. I think this is a really easy book to just fall into, especially if you've read it before, because you know what's going to happen. But it was nice to kind of see the story come together once again. There was a lot of things in this book that I didn't remember, so I was quite surprised to reread them again. And overall, I'm excited to continue on with the series. I feel like there's not much to talk about with this. Most people know what this is about or have seen the movies, so I'll just say that I gave it a 4-star. I enjoyed it. Moving on. Okay, now a book that I can't say the same for. This is Unbirthday by Liz Braswell. This is the Alice's Adventures in Wonderland twisted tale. And I almost gave this a 2-star. Almost. But there was a character in the very end of the story that I really enjoyed, and so it bumped it up to a 3-star for me, but it was a very, very low 3-star. This is basically like a sequel to Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, but one that just wasn't fully fleshed out and fully developed. I honestly can't even tell you what this book is about, so I'm just going to read the twist, and that is, what if Wonderland was in peril and Alice was very, very late? And it basically happens like 11 years later after she originally went to Wonderland, and now she's 18 and she's back in Wonderland, and it was just a hot mess. It was a hot mess. There was a lot of things that didn't make sense in this story. There was a lot of things that weren't fleshed out properly. I didn't care for the writing style, which is interesting because I already read a twisted tale by Liz Braswell and absolutely loved it. This just wasn't it. And I think that the fact that I didn't love Alice, the original Alice story, has a lot to do with it, but overall, I just didn't love it. I also buddy read this with Mike and he didn't enjoy it either, for the most part, so I was pretty disappointed by this. I will not be keeping this on my shelves, so sad for that, but I mean, I'm glad I read it, kind of. I am glad I read it, because now I know that I will not be reading any more Alice's Adventures in Wonderland retellings or anything like that, because I know I won't love them. So there you go. All right, here we go. Another classic. This is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And I definitely enjoyed this way more than I enjoyed Of Mice and Men, but I still gave it a 3-star, and that is because the first half of the book was enjoyable and the second half of the book was boring. I was so bored. But it was good. Like, it was good. It was just like, it wasn't for me. We'll just say that. I definitely enjoyed the movie more than I enjoyed the book, but the amount of times that old sport is said in this book is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And there was like a part of the book that happened and I was like, wait, who? What's going on? I was confused, but I just kept reading on because I didn't really care that much. I don't think that I'll keep this. It was a nice experience for me to reread because I read it in high school, but overall it was just okay. It was just okay. It was just okay. That's all I have to say. Okay, up next we have Stay With Me by Kristen Proby. This follows a girl named Amelia who is in the middle of a really messy and crazy divorce, and she ends up going back to her hometown in Seattle to kind of get away from her ex-husband and find some space, and she ends up meeting her neighbor named Wyatt, and they end up falling in love and creating this really awesome relationship. However, Wyatt has some baggage of his own. He was previously married and divorced after his wife cheated on him, and so they have their own baggage, and it was just really interesting. There was a really awesome aspect about this book that I really enjoyed, and that was that Amelia is actually a beauty YouTuber, and so it talked a lot about filming and makeup and just different things like that, and she's also a makeup brand owner, so it was just really cool to kind of read about that. I've never read about anything like that before, but it was a lot of fun. I overall really enjoyed this. It was smutty, it was adult, it was everything that I wanted in the book and more, so it worked out. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I think that if you're just looking for a fun, easy read with some smut in there that's just fun, then this is definitely a series that you can read. This is the 9th book in the series, I think, but overall, I really enjoyed it. And then another very random book, I ended up picking up the selection off of my pile of shame and finishing it up. I gave this a 3-star. It was okay. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I think that it had some interesting pacing. I think that the ending was a little bit weird. I think that there could have been more of a conclusion to the first book than kind of leaving it where it did, but overall, I still enjoyed it. I'm interested to see where the series goes. I will continue on with the series for sure. I I'm hoping that it gets better, because I've heard people talk about this as like really good trashy YA, as good as trashy YA can be, and I just, you know, I wasn't like in love with it, and I kind of want to love it. So we'll see as the series goes on. Hopefully that changes for me, but overall I enjoyed it. This follows a girl named America who is part of the selection, which is basically like this bachelorette style dating situation to find someone for the king to marry, and she doesn't really want to go. She is in love with somebody else, so there's a love triangle, and overall I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. So there's that. This video is so long, but finally the last book that I read in November, and that is Love With Me by Kristen Proby. This is the 11th book in the series, and this actually follows the storyline of Wyatt from Stay With Me. It's his brother Jace and his best friend Joy. So Jace and Joy, and they have been best friends for years, where Jace actually has a situation at work where he's now suspended from his job as a surgeon, and he ends up spending a lot more time with Joy than he anticipated, and he finds that he has some feelings for her and she has some feelings for him, but they don't know if they want to ruin the friendship. And it just was really cute. Again, a really awesome, easy romance read, smutty, fun. I enjoyed it just as much as the other one. Gave it a 4-star. It was overly really enjoyable, and I'm so glad that I read it. I will definitely pick up more books from the series. I think I own 2 more, and I will definitely read them because they're just fun. They're just fun, and I like it. And I like the fact that the 2 characters were connected, even though they were multiple books like away from each other, if that makes sense, in the series. So that's it. I didn't drink most of my chai tea, which is sad, but I did get through the video, and I'm pretty sure it was messy as hell, so editing me is going to be furious. But overall, I hope that you guys enjoy this wrap-up. I'm still surprised that I did so well in November, I'm not gonna lie. It was a whirlwind of reading, but I enjoyed pretty much every second of it, I'm not gonna lie. And I'm just glad that I got a lot of the things that I wanted to read done, and I made a dent in my TBR that I wasn't expecting to make, so that's awesome. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I would love to know down below what you read in November and what you loved or what you didn't. Please feel free to let me know. And for this video, because Santa is, you know, making an appearance, you can leave a Santa emoji if you made it to the end, just to, you know, send the end of the video love. I'm losing it. I think I'm delirious. Something's happening up here that I don't really know about. But anyways, that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to give it a big old thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe before you leave. And of course, leave any comments, questions, and suggestions in the comment section below. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!